Contemplation. Is something the matter, Lord Mamanga? The old man repeated the same line. Mamanga, dumbfounded, felt his thoughts, which had flown off somewhere, slowly returning. Well, they were back, but in a state of complete confusion. No, it's nothing, it's nothing. He almost said, "It's nothing, thank you," but changed his words. The opponent was an NPC. There was no need to be polite. Desperately trying to convince himself of this, he suppressed all his excess feelings of confusion and shock. For now, he needed to get information, and his thoughts needed to be sharp. Good ideas don't come when you're stuck on a single thought. For a moment, an image of a hamster running on a wheel flashed through Mamanga's mind, but he hastily shook it away. More importantly, what do you think I should do? What do you mean by what should you do? It seems the GM call isn't working. I am unfamiliar with this GM call, but what should I do? If you give me your command, I will act immediately. He was having a conversation. The moment he realized this fact, Mamanga's body froze. It was impossible. No, that wasn't a strong enough word. This was something that could never happen. An NPC speaking. No, it was possible to program an AI to speak, but it was impossible to program it to have a conversation. That's because you couldn't predict how the other person would speak and program every possible response. At first, he thought some kind of pre-programmed AI had been activated. That's why he started a conversation, to confirm. But if he knew it would turn out like this, he wouldn't have done it. A pessimistic thought that solved nothing crossed his mind. Then Mamanga felt a sense of unease. It was directed at both himself and at the butler. He stared intently at the butler, trying to pinpoint the source of this unease. Is something wrong? Have I made a mistake? Ah! A gasp or an inarticulate sound escaped Mamanga as he recognized the source of the unease. The change in the butler's expression. His mouth moved, and then words were heard. Impossible. Mamanga hastily put a hand to his mouth and spoke. His mouth was moving. This was impossible according to the common sense of a DMMORPG. The mouth couldn't move and speak. A character's facial expression was typically fixed. The only exceptions were macros or creating specific emotion tabs which could animate expressions. While it was possible to create 5 patterns and animate them in sync with speech, it was nearly impossible to make a character's mouth move to match the words being spoken. And a mouth moving while the rest of the face remained still looked unnatural to an observer. Assuming the butler had such macros programmed, what about Mamanga himself? He hadn't programmed any such macros, yet he was moving as if he were alive. Impossible. Mamanga felt his long-held common sense breaking apart, along with equal amounts of panic. He desperately suppressed the urge to scream. What should I do? What's the best course of action? This situation is incomprehensible, but lashing out wouldn't help. The first thing to do is information. Sebes. The butler, Sebes, bowed his head. Was it safe to give orders? He didn't know what was happening, but could he assume all the NPCs in this tomb were loyal? Or was it just Sebes? Regardless, there was no one better to send out than Sebes considering all the various factors. Leave the Great Tomb, survey the surrounding area, and if you find any intelligent life forms, negotiate with them and bring them here amicably. You may listen to almost everything they have to say during the negotiation. Your area of operation is a 1-kilometer radius. Avoid combat as much as possible. Understood, Lord Mamanga. Is it even possible to leave the Great Tomb? Mamanga murmured to himself. His sense of an emergency situation grew even stronger. Take one of the maids with you. If you get into a fight, have her retreat immediately and bring back the information. Immediately. That was the first move. Now what to do next? Gathering information was crucial, but there must be other things to do as well. Mamanga let go of the staff of Ain's Owl Gone. The staff didn't fall to the ground, it floated in the air as if someone were holding it. While this sight completely defied the laws of physics, was nothing special to Momonga. In Ugasal, even low-level items often did this. The aura, which sometimes took on the tortured faces of people, clung to Momonga's hand as if with reluctance, but he calmly ignored it. It wasn't familiar, but he thought it was a macro that could be easily programmed, so he flicked it away with a snap of his fingers. Momonga folded his arms and contemplated. The next move was contact. He needed to somehow contact a GM. The GM would likely know the most about what was happening, but how to contact them? Normally, shouting or using a GM call would have worked, but those methods weren't working. So, another way. An idea flashed in Momonga's mind.
Message? There was a spell for communicating. It was a spell normally used only in special situations or locations, but perhaps it would be effective now. The only problem was that it was a spell used for contacting other players, and he didn't know if it would reach a GM. But another question was whether magic would even work in this bizarre situation. However, he needed to check anyway. Momonga's class was primarily a magic caster. If he couldn't use magic, his combat ability would drop by about a third. He needed to find out if magic worked, regardless of the situation. He would need a large space for that, and there was a perfect place for it. He could check various things there. And one more thing. Along with confirming his powers, he had to do something else. He had to confirm his own authority. Was his authority as the guildmaster of Ainz Ul Gaun still intact? The NPCs he had met so far all seemed loyal, but there were 5 other NPCs in the Great Tomb of Nazarick who were his equals. He needed to confirm their loyalty. First, he would check if the golem of the Remedican would obey his orders alone, and then he would secure a safe location. After that, he would confirm the loyalty of the other powerful NPCs. But then, Momonga looked down at Sabos and the maids kneeling before him. Was their current loyalty inviolable and unchangeable? In the case of humans, loyalty to a foolish boss would quickly disappear. Were they the same? Or once loyalty was programmed, would they never betray him? If loyalty could waver, how could he maintain it? With rewards? There were vast treasures in the treasury. If Yggdrasil's gold still had value, that would be enough. Of course, he didn't know their monthly salaries. Or was it by being an excellent leader? But what constituted excellent was unclear. If it was a matter of maintaining the dungeon, he might be able to handle it. Or was it power? The staff of Ainz Ul Gaun flew automatically into his outstretched left hand. Overwhelming power? The 7 gems embedded in the staff began to glow, as if urging him to use the immense magic contained within. Well, I'll think about that later. He let go of the staff. It swayed and then rolled onto the floor as if sulking. For now, acting as a superior would likely prevent them from showing immediate hostility. Not showing weakness was a natural thing that worked for both animals and humans. Momonga rose from the throne and spoke in a loud voice. Apart from the one accompanying Sabos, the other maids will contact the floor guardians on each floor. Tell them to come here. No, to the 6th floor amphitheater. The time is 1 hour from now. Once you're finished, you'll be on alert on the 9th floor, and there's no need to contact Ara. I'll handle that myself. Yes. As the maids bowed their heads, one maid, the first one he had met before coming to the throne room, was not bowing and was looking at him nervously. In his memory, this maid was set as a housemaid with a level of 1 and no combat ability. Ah, you. Master, what should I do? You, stay here. I'll give you different instructions later. Go. Sabos and the battlemates stood up at once and began to walk away. As he watched their backs, Momonga picked up the fallen staff and descended the steps. He stood in front of the kneeling maid. He could feel her looking up at him with just her eyes. Stand up. Yes. The maid stood up cautiously. Momonga reached out to her arm. It was a slender hand. As he was about to take it, the maid made a face as if in pain. Momonga hastily stepped back. What was that? Or was it due to a feeling like disgust? He thought about various possibilities and then it hit him. The former class of an Overlord, a Lich, had a special ability gained from leveling up. It dealt negative energy damage to anything it touched, usually an opponent it attacked. Could this be it? But if so, a question remained. In the game of Yggdrasil, monsters and NPCs that appeared in the Great Tomb of Nazarick were system designated as belonging to Ainz Ooal Gown, and as members of the same guild, they weren't supposed to take friendly fire damage. Did this mean she didn't belong to the guild? Or was friendly fire prohibition now disabled? That was the most likely possibility, Momonga decided. So how could he temporarily turn off a constantly active ability? As he pondered this, a thought suddenly struck him. It was almost impossible to explain how to do it. It was almost like an automatic action. If you reached for a cup in front of you, how would you explain that action? You could only describe it as an order from the brain traveling through the nervous system. The method for turning off the negative energy damage was probably the same. An order from the brain through the nervous system. The various abilities of an Overlord were as natural to him now as breathing was to a human.
Momonga couldn't help but laugh at the bizarre situation he was in. With all these strange events, this was no longer surprising. The power of habit was truly terrifying. I'm going to touch you. He reached out and touched the maid's slender hand. He wanted to feel her pulse. It was there, a rhythmic thump, thump, a heartbeat, a normal sign of a living being. A living being, yes. He took his hand away and looked at his own wrist. It was bone, with only a faint layer of skin. There was no pulse. Overlords were undead, beings that had transcended death. They shouldn't have a pulse. He averted his gaze and looked at the maid in front of him. In response to his stare, she looked down, flustered and shy. What is this? Was she not an NPC, just data? She seemed so real. What kind of AI could make this possible? It was as if this world had become real. He shook his head at the thought of such an impossibility. Such a ridiculous, unfair fantasy couldn't exist. But even as he tried to shake the idea away, it clung to him, growing stronger with each passing moment. And then, I'm sorry. Momonga bowed his head. She was human. He didn't know what was happening, but he understood one thing. The NPC had emotions. Was it a human-like being, or was it a human? No, it's all right. Lord Momonga must have a reason. A sob escaped her. Tears fell. It was only natural. How would he feel if an absolute superior gave him such a command? He felt crushed by self-loathing. But how could he get her to stop crying? It would be easy to drop the act of the superior and apologize desperately. He felt like he should even prostrate himself. But he couldn't. He couldn't show weakness until he understood his position. He had noticed her surprise when he had bowed earlier. Any more than that would be a bad idea. Don't cry. You may leave. Yes. The maid bowed and left the throne room at a quick pace. As he watched her go, Momonga let out a tired sigh. He had two conclusions about the current situation. The first was the possibility of a new DMRPG. That is, at the same time Yggdrasil ended, a new game, let's say Yggdrasil 2, had begun. However, this possibility became very thin after the events he had just experienced. In Yggdrasil, acts of an adult nature were strictly forbidden, even acts that bordered on PG-15. Violators would have their names publicly displayed on the official website and their accounts suspended, a very harsh penalty. This was because if they publicized logs of such acts, they could be in violation of the entertainment business law. If this were still the world of the game, some measure would have been taken to prevent such an act. And if the developers were monitoring, they would have stopped Momonga. But there was no sign of that. Furthermore, under the basic law of DMRPGs, the cyber law, forcing someone to participate in a game without their consent was considered kidnapping for profit. Forcibly making someone a test player was an act that would be quickly prosecuted.
Not being able to force logout could be seen as confinement. In such a case, the law required dedicated consuls to keep 1 week's worth of logs, so prosecution would be simple. If Mamunga didn't show up at the company, someone would check on him, and the police investigating the consul would solve the problem. Would a company commit a crime, especially with a complete record of it? While saying it was Yggdrasil 2 or just a patch might be a gray area, he didn't see any benefit for the company to take such a risk. Therefore, since such a situation was occurring, he had to conclude that some other event was in progress, something not intended by the company. If he didn't change his fundamental way of thinking, he might be caught off guard. The problem was that he didn't know what to change his mindset to. The only other possibility was the second one, the possibility that virtual reality had become reality. It was impossible, Mamunga thought. There was no way such a crazy, unreasonable thing could happen. But on the other hand, the idea that this was the correct answer grew stronger with each passing moment. And then, I'm sorry. Mamunga lowered his head. She was a human. He didn't know what had happened, but he understood one thing. The NPC had emotions. Was it a human-like being, or was she a human? No, it's all right. Lord Mamunga must have a reason. Tears welled up. It was natural. If he were in her position, given such an order by an absolute superior, what would he do? He was crushed by self-loathing. But how could he get her to stop crying? It would be easy to drop his superior act and apologize desperately. Personally, he felt like he should even kneel. But he couldn't. He couldn't show weakness until he understood his position. He had noticed the maid's surprise when he had bowed earlier. Any more than that would be a bad idea. Don't cry. You may leave. Yes. The maid bowed and left the throne room at a quick pace. Watching her go, Mamunga let out a single tired sigh.